In December of 2006, an action RPG would ask me,
to be or not to be? That is the question.
Marvel's Ultimate Alliance is a co-op RPG action game where you get to choose from over 20 plus characters from the larger Marvel universe. The game followed X-Men Legends, not in continuity, but in style, both isometric RPG beat-em-ups tailored for young boys' sleepovers, the type that I was never invited to. But that's okay. I have a dad.
At least we don't buy our friends with our daddy's bank account. Only because you don't have a dad or a bank account.
Each weekend, as my father sought solace from the 2 jobs he worked, I would ask,
"Hello, do you want to play a game?"
I got this game on Christmas and distinctly remember unwrapping it to see Marvel's Golden Boy front and center. I grew up with the Raimi trilogy, which took the super-shaped hole that Blade had pumped into Hollywood years prior and blew it to smithereens, prepping the world for Iron Man and eventually the MCU as we know it. But alongside the Raimi trilogy stood the extremely popular X-Men films.
Thanks.
They were the very franchise that likely signaled to corporate overlords that the market was fertile enough for a game.
I need to be bred! I need to...
Ergo, X-Men Legends. Ergo, Ultimate Alliance. Anyway, I loved Spider-Man. My dad got me reissues of the comic every Sunday. I wore a Spider-Man pajama set to bed and rewatched reruns on JetX. Anybody remember that? Yet and still, after the opening level, I got the choice to change characters. And so I left Spider-Man the Everyman, and I became Part 1, the many metaphors for digitally being someone else. So how's your personal relationship with Scruff user Arthur Morgan? And why does Fallout make people trans? These are questions unanswered in Chris Alton's article, Experience 60 Frames Per Second, but not unexplored in concept. But what I best want to understand is how games not only let you explore their worlds mechanically, but also yourself through the transfiguration of your mind into a polygonal playground. Alton's essays go through ideas of the avatar as vehicle, the avatar as narrative character, and the avatar as cybernetic embodiment. As an ethically non-monogamous video gamer, I've experienced a spectrum of these relationships, and maybe even a plethora more. Vehicular can best be understood in the essay The Myth of the Ergodic Video Game by James Newman, an article that Chris Alton directly references in Experience 60 Frames. Because academic essays are often just conversations across space and time between people who have very, very different readings of their special interest. Newman asserts that the characters we inhabit are best described as a suite of characteristics or equipment utilized and embodied. Through this model, he was attempting to challenge the notion of identification and empathy in primary player-character relationships, and to dismantle the commonly held belief, representation matters. When discussing the L word,
lesbian? The other L word.
Newman states, we may begin to arrive at a point where we don't have to think about in terms of representation. We don't even have to think about her in terms of representational traits and appearance. We don't even have to think about her at all. To Newman, the player-avatar relationship is strictly vehicular and ungendered. To further illustrate his point, he brings up 1997's Gran Turismo, beckoning us to attribute the idea of vehicularness, is that a word? To the characters that we inhabit digitally. But even if an avatar were to be viewed simply as a set of abilities, those abilities would be dictated by the personality and the past experiences of the character.
Headshot, bitch! You just got owned.
I'd go even further and say that their gender and their sexuality can have varying effects on the play experience. Take, for instance, Red Ninja, End of Honor. in which a beautiful young kunoichi named Kurenai stalks through the night wearing a little of the most sexually charged color and no armor. With such little protection, combat can easily be fatal. Thus, Kurenai must rely on the cover of the night and her feminine charms.
Hallelujah!
Is it reductive, boring, trite, uninspired, and actually incredibly sad considering she's on a mission to avenge her dead father and is forced to sexualize herself for both men in-game and out, all of whom take pleasure in their perceived power over her?
Well, yes.
But the possibility of seduction only exists because of who Kurenai is, without the player. To Alton, video game characters are autonomous. They are immediately rendered into digital existence with histories and personalities that intrinsically and directly tie to the gameplay experience. And the idea of the autonomous video game character is evidenced by idle animations that occur due to a lack of player input. Everyone, look at classic Sonic's idle animation.
I'm out of here.
Real. But Sonic jumps to his death because he's such an impatient little guy. He's tapping his little foot. He gots to go fast. He gots to go fast. Gotta go fast. Newman's vehicular allegory is flattening, at least, and misogynistic at worst. Writer Helen Kennedy of Feminist icon or CymberBimbo argues that removing characterization leaves female characters, often created at the helm of male developers, as fetishized objects. Equally concerning is the inherent misogyny in assuming female characters are just objects to be controlled in the first place. She says, in reducing any avatar to the equipment of a car, any potentially progressive aspects of the play experience are minimized to the point of non-existence. Actually, she did not say that. Newman said that.
Wrong answer, forehead.
Awkward, get your quotes right. If I had to put vehicular theory on the woke board anywhere, I'd choose not very woke. Lucky for us, there's a moderate, reasonable theory that's going to save us from the perils of transgenderism hanging over this essay. In the article Playing Roles, Andrew Burns understands the avatar as narrative character, or a narrative figure akin to Walter Ong's concept of second orality. And through this, Byrne describes video game characters as closely related to protagonists in the oral tradition. This theory allows for improvisation in terms of how you play, but also preordained structure. The campaign, the story items, and the side missions act as your script.
Do you want to be an actor?
When I got hurt, the one question we didn't ask was where to go.
Sure, you can choose your gun and change your outfit.
What am I gonna wear? How am I gonna walk? What wig should I wear? How am I gonna act? Am I gonna cry?
But the developers have created beats of a story for you to follow. It's interesting then, this duality. Life as the subject and the voyeur, the audience and the actor.
To be or not to be? That is the question.
This idea mimics our understanding of the theatrical performance, which to me merges the idea of the avatar as narrative character and cybernetic embodiment. Clara Fernandez Vara takes this understanding further. In her essay, Plays the Thing, a framework to study video games as performance, dropping the notion of second orality in favor of positioning the avatar as an actor on stage. It's clear to me that video game characters work as some sort of narrative figure, but also sometimes as an embodied experience. One of the best ways to prove this is by pronoun blurring. For instance, when you're playing God of War, you might say, I'm low on health. And listen, sweetheart, there's no HP here. You're not a terrible man turned great father. If our language is any indicator, it's that there's some kind of cybernetic enmeshment occurring, perhaps even to varying degrees, for varying individuals. And I think that's kind of important. I'm not saying every time you turn on your PS5, your skin melts and your soul is transferred to whatever AAA title has the best water graphics. But I mean, maybe sometimes that is the case. Maybe sometimes for your survival, for your self-understanding, that has to be the case. If is simply reducible to the ability to jump, climb, and shoot, offered up to the player without the female embodiment, the potential queering experiences are lost. Chris Alton, 2012. Aren't we glad the world didn't end then?
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
Part 2. Guns, girls, guys, and gender. Despite having a veteran dad, my family was surprisingly anti-gun.
How's that gonna work?
My first game ever was Spyro Year of the Dragon, and without the safety of a memory card, I would reenact the story of Sisyphus by replaying the opening world of Sunrise Spring over and over and over and over again.
Are you feeling okay, Spyro? Spyro, what the fuck?
Most of my early games were filled with colorful male mascots, usually anthropomorphic animals charged with saving their respective worlds. Think Spyro, Sly, Crash, Ty, to name a few. As the target demographic of 2000's favorite boy toy, not boy toy, but boy toy, I remember the hype of Nerf guns. Boys my age popularized bringing guns to school before it became a commonplace endeavor. But me, on the other hand, I was forbidden to even do this.
You need to leave!
That was until I discovered the very video game character that ponged discussions about identity and play between Newman, Alton, and Kennedy years prior. The character I've been bleeping for suspense and drama, the L word. Lara Croft.
Here's the soon-to-be world-famous archaeologist, Lara Croft.
Tomb Raider 2 changed my parents' gun laws. Suddenly, I was interacting with them digitally, at least, daily. Discovered on a weekday night, I watched as my father revisited one of the hardest first levels in history.
Hurry your ass up. We ain't got no time for the silly shit. Lara!
I asked my father, could I play the game that would become probably one of my favorites of all time? I spent more time than I would like to admit lost amongst the labyrinth levels that Core Design created. In times of stress and joy, I could be found plopped in front of this CRT playing Tomb Raider 2. Lara Croft was a lot of things. Smart, determined, over-sexualized in marketing materials, and uniquely masculine. Not to say that she appears that way, but her strength feels highly attributed to masculine ideas that force a particular binary on women. A binary that seeks to correct the damsel in distress trope by antiquating empathy, compassion, and softness with weakness. Conversely, the strong woman trope Lara can be said to inhabit in her early video game iterations positions strength as a stoicness, a propensity towards violence, and a qualitative physical strength.
Hey guys, I'm not like other girls. I kill people.
She is somewhat alien, this perfected, hyper-feminine appearance, housing a masculine strength and attitude.
She was super tough and very much after the man with no name, you know, the Clint Eastwood style heroes.
Her strength is then what allows men to not disavow her as just a game for girls. She has guns, she kicks ass and takes no questions, and her emotional world is minimized. So in a lot of ways, early Lara became sort of aspirational. The type of woman I wanted to be. The type of woman, I guess, men around me would accept.
Yeah, it's just like going to other worlds, you know, like other dimensions where you aren't rejected all the time. I don't know, like other worlds where your dad still sees you as his own. Maybe I'm not Mark, who works at Arby's. Maybe I'm Onyx, the fortuitous, slayer of the bright realm. I don't know.
In the book, video games have always been queer. Bo Werberg challenges the notion that queerness is new to gaming. With more diversity than ever, it is easy to look back at the lack of explicit representation and feel that there is nothing there for us. But the truth is, as long as games have been played, they've been played queerly. The author encourages us to see the synergy between queerness and video games and actively recognize that LGBTQ people have gayed up and transed up media since the beginning of time, enriching it with more routes to understanding ourselves and the world around us. The history of LGBTQ absence in video games is one ripe with queer potential. When we think of queerness as divested paths, we open ourselves up. The PS1 and many subsequent games were technologically queer. Think Crash Bandicoot of Naughty Dog. Co-founder of Naughty Dog, Andy Gavin, was able to create a workaround for the system's RAM limit of 2 megabytes, 2 MB, whatever that is. Gavin discovered that 64 kilobit packages were able to be rendered near instantaneously and place these assets just out of the player's field of vision. The game functioned by accessing the packages based on the player's locality, rendering them into existence when needed, and deconstructing them when not.
So if it existed there in the machine, whether we were supposed to use it or not, whether you had to use some crazy trick to use it or not, we would figure out how to make the most of it.
This is in essence what queerness and queer theory is about. Ruberg said, in this sense, queerness is simultaneously a term for the lived experiences of LGBTQ subjects and a term for a way of reimagining, resisting, and remaking the world. Gender dysphoria uprooted a lot of my time as a teenager. I spent a lot of time playing girl games. Not necessarily dress-up simulators or shovelware, usually peddled to women, though I did play this Naruto dress-up game that I recently rediscovered. But overall, I took part in a lot of the intersection between geek and boy culture, finding the feminine parts of the medium and holding on to them for dear life. I think many cis women who are interested in traditionally masculine media can relate. I guess it wasn't that I played girl games. Those don't exist. I played games as a girl. In a world that forcibly projected masculine ideas on me, I found an escape. And so the understanding of video game characters as narrative figures and cybernetic bodies is one that I can relate to. I was a sad and lonely kid. I often felt unseen and displaced. This feeling has gotten better. In a way, my life consistently mirrors back to me my womanhood via strangers gendering me, men's harassment of me, and every drunk girl I become best friends with in the club bathroom. I'm often seen most accurately by strangers, but still face some types of invisibility with those closest to me. But I mean, who wants to be a girl? Part 3. First-person shooters, GamerGate, Fascism, and oh my god, I think they hate women.
Women.
Though women make up nearly 48% of gamers today, according to statistics by the ESA, this doesn't account for how women make up specific gaming genres. According to a report by Superdata in 2014, FPS games were made up of 66% men. Furthermore, even though first-person shooters do feature campaigns for a single-player experience, these games foster a heavily competitive online atmosphere, ripe with misogyny and homophobia, especially in the early 2010s. I would say this was one of the main draws of these franchises. Every person who has ever played COD online has discovered a new slur via a random 13-year-old boy, and that type of education is priceless. It makes sense that these spaces wouldn't be conducive to many women's lives, and I would actively argue that that's by design. In fact, a whopping 44% believe that online gaming is more welcoming to men. And while that is not the majority of gamers, I have my own unproven theory that the majority of those who feel this way are women, and that men can't even begin to perceive the hostility directed towards their opposite gendered counterparts online.
But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory.
For some, gaming is transformation. For others, it is a reinstation of the status quo. I began receiving FPS games during the ramp-up of GamerGate.
Oh shit, here we go again.
An online harassment storm directed at women and other minorities in the industry, a reaction to the changing identity of gamers, which were previously understood to be white, cis, straight men.
You don't fucking know me, you're in my fucking house, you just walk through the door, you earn respect in this fucking house, you don't fucking just get it.
GamerGate was especially misogynistic, targeting mostly women, the big names being Zoe Quinn, Anita Sarkeesian, and Brianna Wu. But the undercurrent of the culture tapped into white supremacy at large. In fact, many believe that GamerGate set the stage for Trump's election, and the online tactics employed by the far right to this day. More interestingly, the GamerGate social network, as you see behind me, is an interactive visual graph that shows the various types of discrimination, active participants, and various social platforms through the use of S&A techniques. While misogyny was obviously the most common, transphobia followed second, according to statistics detailed in the graph. However, it is important to note that the lead developer was a trans woman and that misogyny and transphobia are inherently tied together, something that the lead developer took in account while making this, and also worked to minimize the overlap. Over a decade has passed since GamerGate, and I'm left wondering, how has this industry changed for the better? We've gotten more representation than ever, and some really good games that my 9 to 5 just doesn't let me finish. But if GamerGate really did help set in motion America's current fascistic regime, will it boomerang into 2026 and help walk us back into the past? I mean, some think so, like Bryant Francis, senior editor at Game Developer, who predicted the effects of Project 2025 on the gaming industry, if it was to be completed. And rest assured, the government has made steady progress on these goals. According to the 2025 project tracker at the time of writing this, over half of the listed plans have been achieved. In 2024, Francis argued that the expansion of what qualifies as pornography in relation to trans identities could limit the amount of representation, essentially barring trans people from appearing in anything that isn't M-rated. Additionally, the eradication of protections for marginalized identities and the deconstruction of DEI as a whole could lead to departments being stripped, as seen with Microsoft or Meta, and companies being able to discriminate freely without fear of government repercussions. If we truly believe that politics touch everything, it's plausible that we might face a drought of explicit queer representation and the cementation of bigotry in gaming if things do not change. Maybe. But I mean, bigotry in gaming isn't really new. It's a dark shadow that has hung over the industry since inception. Over the years, we took a few steps toward getting better representation for women, non-cis people, the gays. But now we're looking at the possibility of taking a few steps back. For trans women, representation has always been kind of spotty. Birdo, largely considered to be one of the first interpretations of trans femininity in video games, was an antagonistic joke in Mario 2. And the description of who she was only played on stereotypes of the evil, gender-confused T-slur. Tidbit, can we talk about how she would rather be called Burdetta? Are we all mass detonaming her? In the words of Diane Nguyen.
Oh my god, I'm the problem.
Brianna Wu, a main player I mentioned earlier in the GamerGate fiasco, is an extremely polarizing trans woman, and I'm not even going to get into the drama because this is not a tea channel and I largely want to keep my facetious good girl image. But I will say, problematicness aside, during GG, she faced the flames for headcanning Samus as a trans woman in a Mary Sue article. The reasoning is that Samus's bio described her as a new half, a Japanese slang term for trans feminine people. Was the literature being transphobic to a cisgender woman? Possibly. But transgender women aren't even allowed space for reinterpretations or reimaginings. It's clear that video games and the environments that create and support them have not always been kind to women from all walks of life. Though I love to come across those videos with some girl demolishing a herd of idiotic men on COD or whatever the kids are playing today. The girls playing these games are not only true pioneers, but outliers, inhabiting a space actively hostile to them. It's a reality that the film She Puppet reflects with the ever-present Lara Croft. The film consists of found footage and feminist readings weaved together to display a woman under constant attack by the world she inhabits. Meta, isn't it? It's a commonality that cis and trans women face online alike in this community. Do we exist? Undoubtedly, yes. We are both hypervisible due to the sexualization and even the commodification of our identities, but yet and still often invisible, unwilling to talk via voice chat, activate our inboxes, or share our reviews online. For trans women, our hypersexualization breeds a general discomfort, minimizing us to corn identities and degendering us into more palpable identities like femboys. Oh, Bridget, they will be dealt with. Even representation from a canonical trans woman is conveniently degendered for men's sexual gratification. We're pushed to the margins, eradicated as viable consumers that this art form should and could cater to. We're highly visible yet unseen. As FPS games and their communities they fostered took off, I stayed planted to my girl games. Unfortunately, not everyone got that memo. Each year I received a new FPS game that I would attempt to enjoy before ultimately stocking on my shelf to collect dust. I don't want to sound ungrateful, but no one had to give them to me. I often feel that they weren't even given to me as much as they were given to like the idea of me. I think as I grew older, it became harder to force me into male-dominated spaces, particularly in real life. And so it seems that the last frontier of initiation was a last-ditch digital effort towards male socialization. By this time in my life, I was gaining more autonomy to perceive things I wanted and step away from things that I didn't, at least in reason. For me, this meant a retreat from the sports that dominated my childhood and unfortunately becoming a theater kid. But video games weren't something that I had to do. They were inconspicuous and nice, a gift. Though I think I'm too resentful. The person they gifted this game doesn't exist, and maybe they never really did. Part 4. Exist. Gaming can both be a chance for queer self-discovery, a push towards digital male socialization, and a misogynistic community heralding white supremacy and the reinstation of the status quo. It's giving duality, multiplicity. She's not afraid to switch it up. We can view our relationship to video game characters in multiple ways. But even so, I believe our choices reflect something, even if minute. Perhaps a desire for a smaller hitbox, or an acrobatic flair, or a need for gender fuckery or transformation. Never mind what metaphor fits best. If you're watching this video, you've probably hunted to craft a must-have weapon in your arsenal, escaped narrow death, or built a family of 3, a Victorian home inspired by the Eastlake movement. You and I, we have lived lives in these worlds. Our hearts have quickened with fear. We have been touched by death and stayed up all night unblinking at the screen. In Hamlet on the Holodeck, author Janet Murray provides a definition for immersion that bodes just as well for virtual embodiment and cybernetic enmeshment. She says the sensation of being surrounded by a completely other reality, as different as water is from air, that takes over all of our attention, our whole perceptual awareness. We enjoy the movement out of our familiar world, the feeling of alertness that comes from being in this new place, and the delight that comes from learning to move within it. This coincides with our understanding of flow state, the TikTok term of the week, a Super Saiyan form in which the outside world, in terms of both space and time, recedes into the background of perception, and the task consumes the person's awareness in a pleasurable manner. This is a state that I believe my dad and I reached often when playing Marvel's Ultimate Alliance. I think a lot of these moments are my favorite. These memories of him and I are real, even if intangible and ephemeral. I think it's because I could display an approximation of myself, a representative without actual representation. God, life would have been so much easier with the actual representation. Maybe I could have seen myself more clearly. Maybe others could have too. If I prayed, I would pray for girls like me to be more than just visible, more than just feared at or lured over. Honestly, some days visibility feels like a curse, like the world suddenly became aware of an unsettling presence, and it's you. But the good thing is, you can find yourself in places filled with your absence. We have always done that, and we always will.
To be or not to be? That is the question.
Yet and still, after the opening level, I got the choice to change characters. And so I left Spider-Man the Everyman, and I became...
Invisible Woman.